Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Play to Your Best Summit. It's a masterclass with bringing together experts in mindset, nutrition, training, recovery. And I would like to welcome the incredible Jim LaValle as our expert here on, oh my goodness, I am so excited. Welcome.
I'm super happy to be here. This is good.
We have I have been thinking about and going over how this interview is going to go. And we've just briefed a little bit on so many of the topics. And I guess where I want to stay is decades of experience that you're bringing to talk to us about metabolic health. So that's where we're going, but I'm going to share just a little bit with our wonderful participants and listeners to this summit, just who you are, just a little bit.
All right.
So you are an internationally recognized clinical pharmacist, an author of about 20 books, and that's going to be 23 soon, if I've got that right.
You do have that right. I've got 2 in the cooker and 1 I'm redoing, and that'll be in the next year. So, yeah.
So slightly busy there. Board certified clinical nutritionist, expert and educator in integrative and precision health. And we're going to get into that whole integrative part big time, because I think this is a real challenge and real key to what you've been able to create. You're affiliated with George Washington University, clinical instructor in the Masters of Integrative Medicine program. You won awards for Faculty of the Year in 2017 from the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And I think that in one of your podcasts, you were talking about rethinking of this anti-aging, because that's not really the foundation of what this is about. It's about aging with vitality and health and gusto and all those beautiful things. Is that correct?
I'm sure hoping it, because I'm 62 going on 63. So, I'm sure thinking that way.
Yeah. One of the other incredible things that I want to share with everybody that doesn't know you yet, but I'm certain is going to become more familiar with you, is you have an incredible involvement with general population and in general population health, but you've also worked at the highest level of sport with many professional teams, Chicago Blackhawks, Anaheim Ducks, a lot of these hockey teams. I can't, coming from Canada, well done, but also with Olympians, baseball, basketball, football, and ongoing. So you really do have this dual, this foundation of health and into the performance aspect of metabolic health. And we're really going to dig into that today.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I could keep going on. It really does go on. And what I think, I'll leave it so we can get into the interview, is this incredible nutrition and pharmacy, the pharmaceutical. I don't want to say pharmaceutical because it makes it people when you talk about the pharmacy, you're looking both at the natural world, because I know you're really cued into adaptogens, and you're looking at also the supplement world in which we can give our bodies a boost. So this whole duality and this beautiful roundedness, because you also have that nutritional nourishment part of you. Am I missing anything that you think that we need to get?
Let's get going.
Okay. You're okay. So Neil, honestly, everybody's that was quite the introduction.
Yeah, but let's hit it. You can go to jimlavelle.com and read my CV if you want, but
they totally can.
Let's go.
But I think that it's important because it really puts the context to how we're going to have this discussion. And from where you're coming from in both your academia and also your passionate with sport, etc.
Exactly.
So here we are females in perimenopause, in the beyond. And what we're experiencing is it's a really interesting intersection between stress, as you talk really proficiently in many cases, of allostatic loads. And what does that mean? We'll talk a little bit about that. And these symptoms of perimenopause. And we also have this incredible challenge within the population health of insulin resistance. And then we have symptoms of perimenopause. And what's fascinating to me is how many times these things are overlapping. and in terms of symptomology, in terms of how they show up. And what I'm curious about is knowing that that's where we are. I want to come into the really basic question of what is metabolic health to you? And where is it that we can say, oh, this is an aging thing. We are in a life stage. And this is a, oh my goodness, I need to actually take care of my health thing because I don't quite have it all there and all together.
Well, the first thing is I think aging can almost be looked at as a disease. I mean, I think you want to think of aging as how do we age gracefully and keep ourselves and the communication network of all of our organs and tissues communicating together to a point of what's called homeostasis. If I get an inflammatory response for some reason, an injury or a bug, my body's able to deal with it and then turn it off. So metabolic health for me is when you're able to perform at your best. I mean, the real essence of it for me is that, you know, you have to think of that morning where you get up and you just see a flower bloom. And that's how your day should go, right? You should be in balance. You should feel energy. You should feel it, you know, hey, I'm not nervous. I'm not anxious. I'm not craving foods. My brain's not foggy. I'm not having a 3 p.m. crash. I'm not having trouble sleeping. I'm not having issues with weight gain or hot flashes. You know, I've got this balance to me where I'm able to perform at my best and recover at my best. And so that for me is metabolic health. You know, your body's a system of systems, right? So your adrenal glands, thyroid gland, and pancreas actually work together to generate energy. When that balance gets out of balance, now I start to gain weight and feel fatigued. See, so metabolic health to me is all systems are running in a unified way, and you're not moving down the path of what's called aging or inflammatory aging, right? So it's how do we suspend that process as long as we can? And I think the more you dig into how you're feeling, what your labs look at, how much are you training, what's your sleep like, because that's where most people cheat. And that's one of the biggest things to regenerate your body is like following that circadian rhythm of, you know, daytime eating, nighttime repair, adequate sleep. And I think that's, for me, is metabolic health. You know, how do we really create that through that lens of homeostasis where things feel in balance?
Do you, when we think of, because that's a really holistic way, it is holistic in terms, this is your body. So is metabolism then, and I'm trying to understand this idea of the word metabolic, because where I'm seeing there's a lot of more interest in, metabolism or metabolic, and we're hearing it almost as a buzzword. And I want us to pull it out and say, okay, so we can really define it and take it on as ourselves. And like, is it for when I think of metabolic health, I think of two things. I think of our muscles as these incredible sinks of establishing our resting metabolic rate, which why we want to keep our muscle. And I think also of our mitochondria and our like energy powerhouses of our whole body. And that's at the cellular level, that's everywhere. So can you define a little bit closer to us, like how that connects to our wholeness?
So the traditional view of metabolism is the rate of what you burn, right? It's the rate of calorie burn. I've always defined metabolism as the sum total of all the reactions going in your body, all the signaling of your hormones, your neurotransmitters, the uptake of your nutrients, the permeability of the gut, how your immune system is functioning, what's your blood pressure like, what's your heart rate variability like. It is the sum total of all of your current performance in your body today that is shaped from the time you're in your mother's womb to today that creates where your future health is going to be. So if I'm under stress and I'm making a lot of inflammatory cytokines, that can make my gut get permeable. And now I develop, food allergies and sensitivities. And now my joints are starting to ache and my muscles are aching. And now I'm not recovering as well.
Right.
So, your metabolism really is all about every action. Now you've distilled it down. When you get down to it, as your metabolism gets disrupted, it starts to affect your ability of your cell to make energy. So you start to lose what's called mitochondrial capacity. So the powerhouses in the cell, either you make, so when you get under stress and you have less thyroid hormone, you have about 40% less powerhouses in your cell. And when you do that, you also create less energy packets every time glucose goes in the cell. You go from making 38 packets to 2 packets, 19 times less energy in every cell in your body being made, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the mitochondria end up being the end point of metabolic dysfunction, meaning that it damages your cellular health, metabolic capacity to generate energy, which runs all of your body systems. It's the power plants. Or you're sparing, you have strategies to maintain your mitochondrial health as you're aging so that you have optimal power, you have optimal kind of energy to run all the systems of your body as you're aging. Yes, muscle is the currency of aging. There's no doubt about it, right? You want muscle as you age, because that's going to keep you strong, and you want your brain to be coherent with your muscle, because when you're 80 and you're walking up a step, you want your brain to tell that foot to plant in the right spot and you don't have a fall. So that's where you're really going, is maintaining coherence between signaling coming from your brain throughout all aspects of your cellular chemistry and allowing you to continue to maintain the energy that's needed to create metabolic capacity. The other terms that are out right now are metabolic flexibility, metabolic reserve. How resilient am I if I, take on an insult of some kind? All of those things relate to the same thing.
That's okay. That's excellent. I love it because when we talk about, the energy balance equation, it was like energy in, energy out, and it's so not that way.
No, not even close.
It's not even close to that way. And yet in some ways it is, but we're just not encountering, or we're not acknowledging all of that energy, the synapse, all the relationships, the power that's coming out, but because we don't measure those things. Exactly. And so that's what you're speaking to. It's like, and in behind all this, and behind your breathing, and behind all of the things that are so important.
And it was interesting. I did a weight loss program for Lifetime Fitness about a decade ago, and what I named it was, the new weight loss, because weight loss is more than calories in and calories out and how much you train. I know there's a lot of women in perimenopause that are going, you know what? I'm training, I'm watching my diet. I'm doing paleo, keto, FODMAP, plant forward, whatever diet. And, like all at once. I mean, and yet I'm not losing anything. What's going on?
Yeah.
And that's because it's an assumption. It's an assumption that if you just eat right and you just exercise enough, everything's going to work. And it totally discounts stress hormones, sex hormones, gut health, the immune system's role in your weight loss, right? Or weight management, right? So it's like, I've been talking about this for 30 years. And I mean, it used to be people were like, you know what, LaValle, I think you're the redheaded stepchild. You're crazy. It's all about calories in and calories out. And I just knew, because we were seeing so many people. Yeah. I had a women's health center within our institute in Ohio where, my OB-GYN was, we worked with women all the time. And we knew when we got their hormones right, weight come off, they'd feel better. All those sorts of things start to happen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Where I want to take it, and I think you have brought up a couple more points. So I want to come back to some of the points so that we can come back into that integrative part. Sure. So we're going to keep coming into this integrative aspect and how we'll end there actually. But sure, let's come back to this idea of, this reality of called inflammation. And you have meta-inflammation is a term in which is being brought forward. And I know that a really area of your expertise and interest right now. And when we think about the female athlete and somebody who really takes health seriously and is working very hard to think about okay, how am I taking care of my body? But is still having this experience of bloating or just general, weight gain is a thing, and that can be a natural way of just your body is adjusting to a differences of hormones. But talk to us a little bit more specifically about what is happening in this period of our lives, and specifically with the inflammation and what you're seeing.
So when you think of metabolic inflammation, basically your body gets assaulted by something. All right. It could be overtraining. It could be undernourishment, right? It could be exposures to something. It could be a bug. It could be environmental burden, glyphosate from pesticides. Maybe you're on a lot of drug therapy for some reason for a lot of years, or maybe you've been on oral contraceptives, which does affect a lot of nutrients. So for whatever reason it is, your body turns on inflammation as a way to repair. And it's supposed to turn the inflammation off. But if the inflammation is due to, I'm working 12-hour days, I've got 3 kids and a job, and I'm trying to, feed my children good food and be a good parent and juggle a job and work out. My God, I'm trying to participate at church, and I'm trying to participate in the community, or whatever it is, right? So whatever the reasons are where the inflammation doesn't turn off, there are key things that are created. So the first thing is your body starts to make more bad actor lipids. So you'll see things like oxidized LDL. And this is important for women because women don't realize after menopause, more women die of heart disease than men. So understanding that under chronic inflammation and metabolic stress, you start to have bad actor lipids. You start to get anemias. You start to lose your ferritin pool, especially if you're an endurance runner. So if you're somebody who's running a lot, and maybe you said, hey, I'm going to eat a plant-forward diet, I choose not to eat red meat, you should be getting your iron and ferritin checked pretty regularly, because I see that happen a lot. If you're training and you're not replacing your iron, especially if you're still menstruating, you're losing blood. Sometimes it's heavier during perimenopause, sometimes it's not. The next piece that occurs is that because your body's inflammation signaling did not get turned off, let's just say it's due to stress. I'm stressed out all day long. My cortisol levels are high. That creates inflammatory cytokines, interleukin 6, TNF alpha, the compounds that get written about a lot now. So those inflammatory signals from your immune system turn off your insulin receptors. And what happens is you have to start to make energy by aerobic glycolysis. And what that means is I make more lactic acid, I have more cellular acidity, my ATP output goes down dramatically, I start to gain weight, I start to also do other things when I start to become insulin resistant. Blood pressures can go up, blood vessels get more stiff, which I'm finding more women nowadays with hypertension than what I used to, say, 25 years ago. And it's interesting. The next thing that happens is bone loss. So the inflammatory chemicals that get released inhibit bone density resorption, and you start to lose bone density as a byproduct of your system becoming more acidotic because of that lactate buildup. Now we get into the cellular stuff. As you continue to have that inflammatory signaling, what will happen is your mitochondria now are not producing energy as efficiently, don't have the components to make the energy. And so you get into low energy cells, which is what leads to chronic non-communicable diseases of aging. And the other thing is you lose neuroplasticity. So your brain kind of starts to get short-term thinking issues. I always ask people if they feel like they're pushing a thought through Jell-O. And they go, wow, pushing a thought through Jell-O. Yeah, that's kind of how I am. It's like I can't get my brightness can't seem to kind of shine anymore mentally. Now a lot of that can be due to just, in general, women have a stronger fight or flight response than men. So they're more prone to kind of push those buttons and make those things happen. And the one big thing in perimenopause for women, and it's interesting, we have just found this out over the last 3 years, pretty big study showing as women lose their estradiol, as they enter menopause, you have glycans in your cells. Glycans are a structural component of every cell of your body. Those glycans go from anti-inflammatory glycans to making pro-inflammatory glycans just by the loss of estradiol. And when they gave estradiol back to women, their pro-inflammatory glycan stopped expressing, and they went back to their anti-inflammatory glycan defense. So that's pretty interesting, right?
It's fascinating. Do they know why? Like there's always a reason. Your body is always coming back or wanting to come back into homeostasis. Like our bodies are freaking phenomenal at working their asses off and saying, hey, oh my goodness. So estradiol is decreasing. It's a natural process. It's going to happen. It's exactly what should happen. And why would that be a response that the body has, that pro-inflammatory process?
Well, I think that it's, Mother Nature's cruel. Mother Nature, once you're a menopausal female or an andropausal male, Mother Nature designed, right? The old lion gets kicked out, right? Mm. Out of the herd. So your body accelerates after you no longer can, benefit the species, meaning you're no longer procreating. Mm-hmm. So the difference is when you look at longevity, and I am by no means an aggressive hormone person. I think that we have found that people maintain their homeostasis and their production and their productivity. Women don't end up with as much, say, urinary incontinence, vaginal dryness, pelvic floor dysfunction, when they're able to restore a little bit of that hormone. The other question could be, why are our hormones as depleted, maybe versus where was estradiol 200 years ago? We don't know. Were the same kind of problems happening? There's certainly a natural cycle of estradiol goes down. But we're asking for women to be, no one at age 53 is saying, you sit at the elder table now and you just tell us what you think. You're not having to go out in the world and work anymore. Right? Mm-hmm. That's not the way it goes. When, women and men are having to produce at later and later stages, just like for men, if you look at the Men's Health Initiative and looking at the studies done at Baylor and University of Michigan, they're finding out that men with low testosterone as they're aging have a much higher risk of, physical disability, a higher risk of adverse events during surgeries, right? So I think there's a role of saying, what is the level of a hormone that will help you to maintain your longevity, but not push that supraphysiologic levels where I personally believe they're too high and cause problems and negative feedback loop issues. So, it's interesting, but I think we're going to find that estradiol is pretty important in both men and women over the next 5 years.
Oh, I think we know that. And I also, am reminded though, as young girls, we didn't have estradiol either. So it's, and I guess I really want to come into the point that it is absolutely our body knows how to deal with this, knows how to deal with the fact that we don't have estradiol for all our life, and that we are, because that's just, it's a tough transition, I think, and particularly as you point out, because of all the factors and the stressors that we are taking on in life. There is no, we are working later. We are working more. We're working harder. We're working for more stuff. All of these decisions that we are making in our lives are not helping.
Well,
hormone balance.
You're right on. You're hitting it right on the head, because elevated cortisol blocks gonadotropin releasing hormone. So women don't make estradiol as well. They make more estrone. And depending on if their diet's high in fiber, if they're eating a ketogenic diet, they're going to create more circulating endotoxin. They're going to more than likely make more beta-glucuronidase, which is going to take that estrogens that you were metabolizing and uncouple them, and instead you're going to recirculate them. So you see what happens is that we look at estradiol to estrone ratios all the time in women. And we also look at how their estrone and estradiol are being metabolized. So some women more prone to make unfriendly metabolites, hence more ovarian cancer risk, more fibroid risk, more breast cancer risk. And then there's women who handle it good. They metabolize great. They're having a high fiber diet. They're, watching, they're not eating too many sweets and whatever other thing. They're not exposed to too many pesticides or xenoestrogens. And so it's a real balance that I think has to take place. And in the end, for me, if a woman's not having symptoms and she feels great, you don't want to mess with you don't want to do any kind of replacement. But if I have a woman who is, has vaginal dryness and has urinary incontinence, and it's really affecting her quality of life, well, her body in some way is starting to fail her early because she's not able to stay in homeostasis. Things are breaking down. What do we do to help?
Yeah, how can we support it? Yeah, by hormone therapy. Yeah, and to smooth out that transition and to support that body. And I think that's the same way as thinking about. And I just want to offer, like, it's almost like supplementation. It's not forever, but it's to support that body in this time of need for which we aren't able to. I've said this in another interview, no amount of kale is going to help you get out of this.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
nice.
So we think about, hormone therapy as an option to smooth out and to support our body, just like if you are having metabolic health issues, which may be happening at the same time, that you can look to supporting, elevating through whichever might be that area. So we're going to get into that identifying and how to look at it.
Sure.
One of the things that you have brought up in a number of ways, and I want to help the listeners understand this, is that there is really, you speak to 5 areas that impact our metabolic health. So it's nutrition, obvious. You're, in the clinical nutritional and support and thinking that exercise, environmental. So you've talked a little bit about like xenotoxins, like, I don't know if people know what that is, but all the bombardment of cleaning agents and
hormones in your
chemicals. And yeah, it's a real thing, people. And, pollution, or, we had the smoke advisory just the other day where I am, and I was just like, you could feel it. My voice was getting hoarse. And that is, our bodies are just taking that stuff in. You mentioned drugs as well, and then genetics. So what I would like to ask you now, so we have these 5 buckets of areas that are really, that you've spoken to already.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can we get into, how do we know where to prioritize? And this is obviously coming into your metabolic code and thinking about blood work and thinking about learning and paying attention to our symptoms. So could you talk to us a little bit about that? And how do we start identifying, okay, so what is the issue?
Well, for me, it's why I developed the metabolic code. I had doctors, because I'm the co-chair at the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And so I have doctors coming to me all the time going, I don't know where to start. And they'll, hey, everybody should take a probiotic. Everybody should take a multi. Everybody should take vitamin D. Everybody should take a fish oil. Well, a lot of people, by the time you get through that, they start getting pill exhaustion. So my whole point is start where the biggest areas of metabolic disruption are. So I'm a big believer in a very comprehensive lab test. Look at symptoms, called mixed method analysis, right? Symptoms plus labs plus biometrics plus wearable data. And thank God this is telling us to breathe, because otherwise I don't know what I would do. Right. I mean, it's crazy.
Tells us to get up, tells us to breathe.
It's like, oh my God, I gotta let my diaphragm go. Oh my God, it's stressful. So the big issue becomes, well, where do I start? So what I did was designed a 40,000 decision algorithm that breaks things down. So one metabotype is adrenal, thyroid, pancreas, the relationship between cortisol, glucose, insulin, and thyroid, right? Cortisol's up, insulin's up, cortisol's up, insulin up, blood glucose up, and thyroid hormone starts to go down, right? So my metabolism slows down, and I start to really begin to have issues around, how I'm feeling and the energy I produce. The next metabotype is gut immune brain. And that's that relationship. Not just do you have food allergies, do you have a leaky gut? Because guess what? If you're stressed out, if you're anxious, or you're nervous, or you're feeling overcommitted and your cortisol curve flattened, like your cortisol is supposed to go up in the morning, down at noon, down again at 4, and down again at bedtime. And at bedtime, your body releases melatonin and tells you to go into deep sleep so you can rejuvenate your body. Yeah. If you're not doing that, by default, your gut will become more permeable because the stress hormones tell your tight junctions of your gut to gap. So you could do food allergy panels and drink all the glutamine and cat's claw and oregano and probiotics and all you want. I'm going to do elimination diets. I'm taking Tibetan goji berries for my belly, whatever. Yeah. Right. It's like you said, all the kale salad in the world isn't going to correct this because you haven't identified that where it's really starting is probably with your stress response. And so that's the thing that I really try to get across is gut immune brain is about that relationship between allostatic load. Did I get enough stress on my body that now I'm changing my immune signaling, my nervous system signaling, my serotonin's off of my belly, and now I'm getting some irritable bowel. And then how that's affecting, I get plenty of people that are malabsorbers. I look at their nutrients and they're just low in their body because they're under a lot of stress, and maybe they've been on antibiotics, or maybe they've been on NSAIDs or whatever, and their gut's broken down. The third is what you said something earlier about the nervous system. It's cardiopulmonary neurovascular. Where's my heart rate variability at? What's my resting heart rate like? What's my blood pressure like? Am I a deep breather? Where are my lipids, right? Do I oxygenate well or not? Fourth group, liver, lymph, kidney. How am I detoxifying? Am I anemic? Iron, B12, folate, or my kidneys? A lot of people don't realize, especially in endurance athletes, I'm always watching for kidney function because of the heightened oxidative stress that happens when you're doing endurance sports. You create more free radicals. What's one of the easiest ways to evaluate that? Do a urinary pH. If your urinary pH is below 6.5, you have heightened oxidative stress. And that's in the literature. I mean, it's not something I invented. And of course, the fifth relationship is about hormones, progesterone, testosterone, and estrogen. And so those 5 metabotypes start to define where am I having my problem. Most of the time, people are having problems in gut immune brain, or they're having problems in adrenal, thyroid, pancreas, or the combination of the two, right? I get under enough stress. My immune system starts to get cranked up. Now I start attacking my thyroid, right? So these things kind of relate to each other. But most of the time, it's those first 2 metabotypes where people start out having problems, and then it distills down until you hit certain ages, and when just hormone insufficiencies start to drive problems for people as well.
It's what I love about what you've done, and I just want to point out, like, this has gone through for the listeners. Like, I think your stats are like 10,000. Like you've been in incredibly high volume testing and have universities and a lot of critical analysis done to this system of analysis in which you're pulling in data. Data. How do we actually see it? And what I love about it is that it's always coming down to the foundation of how is your health, and then how do we get to performance? So those 5, and I encourage the listeners to check out the website, because then you can see them really clearly. And like I've written them out because I think they're really cool. And your key words for them, I'll just tell the listeners: energy, resiliency, endurance, detoxification, and potency. And those words themselves kind of like, where are you on these pieces? That's and right. You've systematized that. And because you're right, I have had, I really had huge fertility issues because of my endurance sport background and incredibly high stress levels that I put my body under that took me many years to recover from.
Right.
And when I would go to my, I did traditional medicine, like the medical model, and I did naturopathic physicians. And I honestly, I was overwhelmed. I'd be like my 40-page report and I looked like I was just on death's bed. I'm just like, okay, people, like, I am really not there. Yes, my fertility issues, I have issues, obviously, and I want to know how to support my body, but I hated it that I felt like it was just such a big, I didn't have a starting point. So I love that you've offered that and you've created a system for that, because it makes it so much more doable and something that you can say, okay, I'm going to start here and get that, and then get that, and then get that.
That's it. That's so important.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very few people like I'm a Spartan. So I've trained since the age of 13. I mean, I was already in the gym this morning. I got a gym in my garage. I've trained forever. So Spartans, like if I come to you and you tell me, here's the 10 things I want you to do, Jim, then you know what I'm going to say? You don't have 12.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, so Spartans are like, give me everything you've got and I'm going to deploy it immediately, and I will do it exactly the way you say. I'm going to do this. Yeah. I'm going to do this. Yeah. Not a lot of those out there. So we've got to realize that there's time limitations. How can I help people get to better food quickly? Because there's time limitations on cooking. There's time limitations on, do a half-hour meditation. I just try to get people to box breathe 4 minutes twice a day. Yeah. If I can just get them started with simple things that they feel a difference. Wow, my cravings are down. I'm not as anxious. I'm not as agitated. I'm sleeping better, right? Yeah. All those things make a big difference. For the big price of breathing. And that's what's actually part of the problem. Like, it actually is putting the onus on us, is saying, you know what, like, hate to say it, but you forgot to breathe again. And and no, it doesn't cost anything, and you can't buy yourself out of this one, because we've become such a, and we're all guilty, like this consumeristic, I was literally this morning coming to this interview, I was like, wow, 5 minutes matters. Like, I'm living my 5-minute matter life right now, because I don't have, that's how closely I'm on it. Now, we can't sustain that. Once in a while, now let's go in and take that 5-minute matter life and bring it into the athletic life, where so now we have this foundation of health, and we've identified and we are working optimally. And now we want to get into more of a performance and metabolic performance, your work with the professional teams. What changes when we add that stress of, but you know what? You're going to go and push hard. You're going to do an Ironman. You want to qualify for X. That's and right. How does anything change here as we get into that pointy end? And how do we think about that? Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, things are different. I mean, for example, we worked with Corvette race team. Corvette race team kept wrecking their cars. Not a good thing if you're trying to win a race. No. And we went in and we evaluated them. We straightened up their chemistry. But the big thing we did was we taught them brain coherence, because it turned out we gave them a pill to swallow, and we watched as their body temperature went up, their reflex time went down. That's called brain coherence. As core body temperature goes up, you lose that coherence. So the real trick to really getting athletes to perform is to keep the balance between sympathetic drive in the moment and the reserve of your nervous system being able to handle the upload, right? So what happens with people, for example, an endurance athlete, all of a sudden they've overtrained, and now they go out to run and they go to 80% of their max heart rate within 3 minutes, right? You hear that, where they lose their vagal tone, right? They lose that ability to countermeasure. So you have to pay more attention to pH. You have to pay more attention to trace minerals. You have to pay more attention to cortisol. I'll do what's called diurnal cortisol patterns on people, measure it in the morning, measure it at noon, measure it at 4, measure it at bedtime, because a lot of times people are doing different time zones if they're pro athletes and they're playing and they're, you're trying to match up their circadian rhythm as best you can, right? Which is also another whole story of daylight and night. And so, there's a bigger attention that's paid to on just looking at, well, where's your bone density at? For example, basketball players tend towards, tendinopathies, and they get stress fractures. Well, a lot of times stress fractures are because as your cortisol levels are going up, because you're training a lot of hours, all right, you start to create a more acidic chemistry, which then you lose minerals from your bone in order to keep your pH corrected. So you'll start to melt down bone. Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff that you have to look for is, where is your glucose at? I mean, I have a lot of endurance athletes that have high morning glucoses, like high normal morning glucoses. And, you wouldn't think that that would be the case, but if their sleep isn't right or their cortisol is elevated, then by default, your glucose starts going up, and you got to manage that, because an elevated glucose creates a baseline of inflammation and a baseline of excess sympathetic tone. And so I really have to evaluate each athlete, but there's some big things that happen more frequently with them because of how much they train. And then it's nutrition, right? I mean, they're listening to the latest blogger on nutrition, and it's maybe good information and maybe bad information. I mean, everything from the carnivore diet to the plant-based diet is going to make you perform the best. And the reality is, I found that when you skew diet too much, typically performance ends up being compromised, right? It's that, where's your iron stores? Where are your ferritin pools at? All of those things matter. And then getting the nervous system right, making sure they're sleeping well matters. So I may have to give them melatonin if they're traveling time zones, or if you're an endurance athlete that's also an attorney and a mom, that's like you're running that 16-hour high-end energy. I may have to help you turn that juice down so your body recognizes that it's time for homeostasis. And that's where the power of nutrients are at. And as well, I mean, I'm a big advocate. It all starts, you got to eat every day. The one thing, you don't have to take ashwagandha, you don't have to take rhodiola, but you got to eat. So everybody should learn and work into what diet's right for me and my chemistry. And then what are the right nutrients that I need to support based on the type of training that I'm doing.
That's a really important point. Okay, so there's two things I want to come back to that point. So if I don't, make sure I do. The first one is that you keyed on to something that I actually cannot find any literature on, and you mentioned it, so I have to bring it up. So one thing I see very common among my athletes, and we, in my programming, we have a lot of the breathing. We do the box breathing. I have an expert on breathing, awesome. Anne Green, my co-host. She's from tradition of yoga, bringing in, like all these components. We have the nutrition. We've got this full balance, base of health. And I'm very, very adamant. I believe in the 80-20, meaning a philosophy of 80% aerobic, keeping those metabolic health really strong, and then 20% intensity, and making sure that we don't do too much. So knowing that I'm not overtraining them. And yet there's a commonality of my athletes in this age group that is just like, Tennille, my heart rate is going crazy. And it's not a palpitation perimenopause. I'm sitting on the couch and all of a sudden my heart rate flies to the roof. It's this idea of I'm starting out and I don't know why it's taking my body. It's just like my heart rate just wants to go from here to here in a second. And that my advice, and I'm curious, I want to learn from you, is we need to start slower. We need to bring our body into it much slower. I want you walking. I don't want you starting off in a jog. I want you bringing it, start walk jogs and then allow your body to just come into it a little bit smoother. what is happening? Because you talked about your vagal nerve and you talked about this idea of, do you know, or could you share with us what might be happening there?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, first of all, your advice to them is absolutely spot on. I mean, when I have people whose heart rates are, too quick, too high, too fast, that means that we need to create more autonomic balance, which is going to happen by walking. You can start with brisk walking, then you can go into walk jog, and then you can eventually jog. But is the person baseline anxious? Is the person baseline nervous? Do they have, are they perseverators? Are they under a lot of stress? Is their cortisol high? Because by default, you create excess sympathetic tone. So what happens is adrenaline and noradrenaline go up, and your parasympathetic nervous system, which is supposed to balance that vagal tone, that is going down. And this is the anti-inflammatory signaling for your nervous system, the parasympathetic tone, the use of acetylcholine. And so what happens is people shift, getting up, lots of daylight, lots of this stuff, not breathing. They have a poor base to their magnesium. Amino acids like taurine, really important for heart rhythm. It's that the posture their nervous system is in, is most likely due to where their baseline of when they walked in the first time to see you, which is most likely overstressed, too much light exposure. So too much light exposure late at night. There's something something that's called the synaptic chiasmatic nucleus.
The suprasynaptic.
Yeah.
I got it. Yes.
So this chiasmatic nucleus of your brain is a clock that's running all the other clocks in your body. So if you're under a lot of stress, your glucose regulation for the next day isn't going to work, because that suprachiasmatic nucleus is sending a signal to your beta cells that makes insulin, and it's distorting it because you're getting too much light at night, and you're getting too much stimulus at night, and you're probably eating too late at night when you should be letting your body, return to rest. And I'm not a big 18-6 guy. I've found too many patients that, it doesn't work for them. I look at their chemistries, they're a mess. But I do think people should think about 12-12. Like, that's how I grew up as a little boy.
Yeah, you're talking about time restricted eating.
Time restricted eating really is. It's eating at regular hours. I mean, come on. I mean, it's like, I'm this little Italian boy, it's like 7 a.m. breakfast, 12 p.m. lunch, 5 p.m. dinner. And if you're a really good little boy, you get a little treat at 7. Yeah. Oh my God, we were doing time restricted eating in 1962.
I think that I'm glad that you actually brought that up. Like, it's an interesting thing that we go into these, like you've already mentioned, all the fads of like, and then we just put them on something else. And we're just like, actually, it's just that you have a regular eating pattern and that you give your body time to rest and digest. Like that's I don't know what decade that was brought up, but it was many, many ago. Okay. I wanted to come back to the other point that I might lose in my head, and I think we can end on this one, is talking about that. I think it was about the endurance and using the substrates, and thinking about how do we think about glucose and setting our bodies up for metabolic health in this way as we are doing our exercise. That's how that can really shift. If we're always eating sugar to fuel this work, then how that actually ends up being that we're always using sugar, always. And this is not a good thing. So how to balance that out with, the macronutrients.
Yeah. I mean, I think, people that just use sugar end up triggering more insulin response, which then triggers, more adrenaline. And so you get into that whole thing of erratic energy production over time.
Yeah.
So, I've always been a proponent of, we all don't process macros at the same amounts. I have to eat a pretty low carb diet or I gain weight. I got all the genes for diabetes. I got all the obesity genes. My brother was 470 pounds. I mean, I have to really watch, where I'm at, or I just start gaining weight. It's real easy. Other people may have more tolerance for that. And based on what you're doing exercise wise, sure, you need you need you need fats and you need carbohydrates that eventually get stored as glycogen. Interesting compounds like UCAN, which is a long chain glucose, a drink that doesn't affect, kind of the gut. So people don't get gastroparesis and they don't get, discomfort. Really like using that in my endurance athletes because it kind of helps to neutralize their inefficiency for glucose metabolism until we correct for that. Obviously things like magnesium, chromium, B vitamins, really important for making your insulin receptor work, just to say a few. And then, I'm really big on adaptogens because when you do train a lot, that is the equivalent of, when you're an endurance athlete, your brain's thinking that you're running from a white tiger for an hour. And if you're doing intervals, it's like you just put 5 white tigers in the cage with you, right? And so, and by the way, adaptogens are the most valuable herb in every culture since the beginning of written medicine. That's pretty crazy to think about. Every culture identified that stress response was the most valuable thing to attack with the plant medicine of that culture. And now we use Prozac and Xanax. We wait till people break instead of, how can I keep your heart rate from running away from you when you're going to perform at a higher level, right? And so I really like helping people to, maximize the core things that are needed, things like mag and potassium and chromium and, all those sorts of things. But then, well, are you a candidate for something like theanine because you're a perseverator and you're quick to make glutamate and histamine? And when you make a lot of glutamate and histamine, your brain neuroinflammation goes up quick. And now all of a sudden you are triggering excessive sympathetic dominance. So is it something like theanine or holy basil or relora and those are more for people that are feeling the effect of the stress. I eat under stress. I hug the Lay's potato chip bag. That's relora. I want stress-induced comfort food. Whereas if I'm not having those things, but I want to stay protected, come on, cordyceps, rhodiola, schizandra, the classic herbs for protecting your nervous system from getting out of control. I really believe in today's world, they're essential for the athlete because you know what? More and more athletes are training like pro athletes.
Yeah, it's true, actually. I know, because I've got some of them and they're phenomenal humans and they are doing phenomenal things. And I'm very glad that we have the knowledge to use those adaptogens now, because they certainly weren't, when I retired in 2013, we weren't talking about them. You may have been, but
right. I was, but
you were, but I didn't know you yet. But I know you now.
Exactly.
Oh, this is so brilliant. Okay, so we have covered a ton of ground. And what I just want to say is you've brought up a lot of points of like, where is your body at? So when people if they're interested, understanding, okay, well, what is this metabolic code thing? We can just point them to the website. I think is the best place because it's mostly, there are some strength trainers that have it, but there's more of a healthcare professional.
Yeah, exactly.
Are more involved in actually being in the practice and supporting the person through it. So if you are wondering where your genetics are, because that was one piece, where your nutrition is at, where your body's at, where your adrenal glands, where your thyroid glands, or your kidneys, where your liver, all these pieces, all of it, and looking at that really integrative approach, because this is it. We can't separate our bodies out. We are one human. After all, we're not just going to look, and it doesn't make sense to go after something, as you said, without knowing where's the source of this. Exactly. So go there. Okay. Now let's talk about your beautiful free gift that you're giving everybody. You are going to share the top 10 longevity supplements with our listeners. So that will be in a link so that you can go. Is there anything that you wanted to say about that?
Oh, no, you know what? I put that little ebook together on a whim. I've written like 25 ebooks, and I mean, this one, I think I literally am finishing it right this second. There's a couple lines that I want to get done and it's done. And it's just because people ask about, well, how do you look at longevity? So this is a nice little introduction to that. And it talks about metaflammation and what it leads to. And then it's just, what are the top nutrients that are out there, or things like peptides that are kind of the coming rage that people are wondering about, that, can help you from that goal of longevity. I mean, I can tell you that when I turned 60, I got really interested in longevity,
Yeah, well, Dr. Peter Attia talks about, the final decade, or I don't know how he says it, but it's like, let's live the best final decade of our life, like full of just that energy. And we see that and we look at that, and that's possible for all of us. But we have to be pretty darn committed to it and have a great strategy around it. All right. Are you ready for my rapid fire questions?
Let's go.
All right. Okay. This is going to be interesting. What in your work or in your learning are you super stoked about right now?
Right now, it's all about transcriptomics. It's all about looking at how genes get turned on and turned off due to metabolic inflammation. And then what do you do to turn those genes from being suppressed or being overactive back to that homeostasis state? So we're just now learning how to measure that. So for me, it's not about the gene. It's about what got turned on or turned off. It's driving your current state of health. And then how do we correct it? And of course, adding artificial intelligence to our Metabolic Code platform. So we start to create kind of a digital twin, right? A view of, hey, you know what? Your chemistry looks like this. These are the things that most likely are going to work for you. And then there's always the skill of the individual, coach or healthcare professional that's going to add into that.
Oh gosh, that is such a huge thing. I've only done a little bit of reading about it, but like starts in the womb. Like what's turned off? Oops. Maybe we should turn that one back on, or that one needs to be deactivated.
That's exactly right.
How do we go? All right. What is one thing that you're really grateful for?
My family. It changed my life. I got a beautiful son, 2 stepdaughters. We're close. I mean, the bond and commitment that I've moved through my life. And then, I also feel very fortunate for my health. That's the other one. I mean, I'm pretty darn active at my age. A lot of people don't take me for my age. And I think if I'm going to be a good voice for that, I'm grateful that I do have good health and practice what I preach and enjoy it.
Yeah, that's integrity. What is one principle that you live by?
Oh, that's easy. Service.
Oh, that's great.
Just want to help people. It doesn't matter which situation it's in. It's all about service.
In a recent, interview I listened to is about what is one of the major components of satisfaction and happiness. And they said, and how do you have this balance between being really successful in life and happy? Because the most successful people aren't necessarily happy people, and success being, imagined as the dollar and what you have. And it was service. It was like, well, if those successful people are in service, they are happy. So it's just, that's the key. And it's evident from all that you have done and all that you have shared, and the time that you've given to us, and to really, hone in on some of the questions here. I really thank you. And I'll give you the last word. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us all?
I just, in your quest for performance health, because that's what I call it these days, is performance health, just be joyous. Have fun. That to me is the most important thing that we can get is, enjoy this life, that last 10 years, whatever that window is for you. So that's it for me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Sure.